Hello, good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here today with you. I'm Susana Elena Perez. It's very nice to see some familiar names around this webinar. As you know, I'm coordinating the working groups under the S3 Community of Practice. And today we are having the last webinar on the topic of innovation diffusion. We had a total of 6 along the whole duration of the Smart Specialization Community of Practice. And today, as we can see in the next slide in the agenda, we will basically in the next couple of hours trying to illustrate and share with you all the efforts that we have been doing during the last year and months on a new tool on innovation diffusion. So as you can see in the agenda, after my welcoming remarks and a brief explanation about the rationale, we will have Alison Hunter, who is the rapporteur of our working group, as many of you already know, will present the structure and the outline of what we are doing and the main focus areas. Then, of course, since we don't have time to explain everything, we would like to open a Q&A session so that you can interact with us and ask anything that you need. And after the brief introduction about the toolbox, we have a fantastic expert panel together with Santiago, who will be moderating the session, Santiago Donat, who is working as a chair of the working group. We have 2 working group members that are very familiar with the work that we are doing because they participated intensively in all the discussions and all the developments. José Antonio Pascal from Andalucía Trade and Miriam Martín from Teomimed. And also we have in the expert panel 2 external experts that are very knowledgeable about everything related to the S3 framework and all the I3 instruments. Cecilia Gagnan and Anita Treknen, who are senior advisor on territorial development and EU policies. And of course, we will have after that another session that will be done through a Slido. We will be sharing with you a QR afterwards and a link so that you can interact through the Slido. And we will finalize with some closing remarks so that we can share with you the next steps. We can go to the next slide. I will just say a few words about the context in which we are actually contributing to this innovation diffusion toolbox. As many of you know very well, we kick off the working group on innovation diffusion together with other 2 working groups under the S3 Community of Practice. One on interregional collaboration, one on industrial transition, and this one on innovation diffusion. We have 15 fantastic working group members that contributed since we kick off in March 2023 through all this way together, trying to understand the main implementation challenges that regions and countries in Europe have dealing with the innovation diffusion. We have been producing different notes and different policy briefs. And in the slide, you can see the latest that we published at the beginning of this year. So with no more delays, I will basically start explaining a little bit the rationale that is behind this toolbox that we initiated recently, the why and the what. So when we were discussing the implementation challenges, we actually realized that innovation diffusion is much more than one of the 7 enabling criteria of the S3 governance, but basically, the ability of regions to effectively spread innovation is fundamental to achieving sustainable development and economic growth. And of course, regions are dealing with this in many different ways. But we actually confirm in our discussions that many regions in Europe struggle still to fully leverage their innovation capacity. So our aim is to provide basically a tool, some resources to basically help regions to self-assess what they are doing in terms of innovation diffusions and be able to use a practical tool that is very user-oriented to understand much better the mechanisms that they are using in their own regions to self-assess how they are progressing in innovation diffusion, but also to provide a guidance so that they can improve the elements that are not well or could be better integrated into the policy mix. And we would like also to provide a repository of good practices and tools for regions to get inspiration from other practices in different regions. The primary user of these toolbox are mainly S3 policymakers. But of course, when we are talking about innovation diffusion, we are talking about the whole innovation ecosystem. That's why all the resources, the tools that will be incorporated in the toolbox are also designed for those S3 stakeholders that are contributing to innovation diffusion in the region's countries. So the engagement, active engagement of the community is necessary and is a condition to make the full potential of the tool that we are going to present. As Alison will mention now, this is just an outline. So what we are doing is basically starting with the conceptualization of this toolbox, and we are using this webinar to reach out to broader community, more regional stakeholders, that those that are actively participating in the working group, to get also your ideas about how useful this tool could be and in which way we can actually improve. As you know, we have the support for all this work from the EU, of course, and I think it's very important your presence today, because this gives us all the necessary insight that we need in order to advance, to progress in the toolbox. So in the next slide, you can see the key principles that are behind this toolbox. Our main philosophy is to provide regions, as mentioned before, a continuous tool for self-reflection. We believe that this continuous reflection is important to encourage evaluation and to improve all regional innovation strategies that will basically impact in a better innovation diffusion. We also intend to provide a user-friendly design for regional stakeholders that is accessible, that is addressing the main challenges, and that are providing equitable innovation diffusion across the different actors and regions. We also want to have this practical approach with very specific examples, as I mentioned before, what we call the good practices, but also additional resources, case studies, template to assist S3 policymakers and other S3 stakeholders in fostering collaboration and designing effective policies. And finally, our principle, while trying to define and build this toolbox, is sensitivity to regional diversity. We all are very well aware of the different mechanisms and structure of the regions. And so we want to have a toolbox that is flexible enough to understand and to assume this variation in terms of geography or economic structure or development status. So having said that, my colleague Alison is going to present briefly what are basically the structure and the focus areas of this ID toolbox. Thank you, Alison.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Susanna. I think that was a very, very clear introduction to the toolbox. Good morning, everyone. Very happy to be here with you this morning and to share with you some insights and an overview of the pathway that we are navigating in building the outline and the framework for the Innovation Diffusion Toolbox. Could we move to the next slide, please, Santiago? Thank you. Just want to confirm with you that we have, obviously, as Susanna said, some key principles that we have followed, and that this has very much been guided by our working group. They have very much provided a reality check about their different local contexts, about insights into practices with respect to innovation diffusion, some which have worked well and those that have worked less well. And there is a very much a strong long-term focus on the use of the toolbox. So we have to ensure that the toolbox framework, the skeleton that is helping us to guide the direction for it, is not complicated, and that it has this long-term use in terms of effectiveness and impact. So with that, some of the conditions, if you like, that our working group members were very keen that the toolbox is built on. So it must allow for a robust assessment of innovation diffusion practices. We'll come on, excuse me, we'll come on to what we mean by robust assessment in just a moment. Facilitating a trial and error approach is extremely important. So it's important that the toolbox allows regions to be able to explore different types of practice and to adapt the kinds of policies and the kinds of practices that they have in place with respect to innovation diffusion. Of critical importance is that the innovation diffusion toolbox will be aligned with wider S3 objectives. To date, we have really found in the work that we've done with the working group that there is a tendency for innovation diffusion to be a little bit fragmented with respect to the other elements of smart specialisation. So the innovation diffusion toolbox really offers an opportunity for improved alignment within innovation diffusion and the other elements of smart specialisation. It should facilitate a sectoral driven innovation diffusion review. So that's going deeper than just core principles and practices with respect to innovation diffusion. And it should, of course, allow for continuous monitoring, which I'm going to come to later. It should help to foster a shared vision. So this is very much about bringing different innovation actors together across the region, both in using the toolbox and the tools within it, so that this then shifts into the implementation phase. Promoting interdisciplinary collaboration is obviously very important, and the toolbox can act as a trigger for this. And of course, it's about connecting regional geographies. Now, those could well be municipalities or areas within the region, helping to bring them closer together. And it could be about bringing different regions together, so beyond the regional context. I would just like to remind everyone, though, that what you see, or what we're going to share with you today, is a first take of the toolbox outline. The working group after today is going to be spending much more time on looking at these various steps and stages, the tools, the guidelines that we have put together, and really critiquing these to check, are they user-friendly? Will they be the right ones to be able to be adapted and used at the regional level? So what you're going to be hearing about today is very much about sharing what the reality is of innovation diffusion on the ground and how we hope to be able to improve that through the toolbox. Could I have the next slide, please, Santiago? So basically, this is an overview of the toolbox prototype, the design process. It has 4 key steps and stages within it, and I'm going to go through these in a bit more detail in just a moment. The challenge today is to give you enough content for you to have a feeling for how the toolbox will hopefully evolve, but not to overwhelm you with the detail that is going behind this, particularly because we're still very much at a conceptual stage. So we might find that we have to adapt these steps and stages as we delve a little bit deeper. So we obviously very much welcome your feedback on this. The 4 steps are, of course, in and of themselves rather iterative. So what happens at each of the steps and stages should help to change and adapt the way that innovation diffusion works within a region so that it is kept as a dynamic process. Now, if we just look at what the content has in each of these steps and stages, the first step, just go back a second, please, Santiago. The first step is around assessment. To date, the working group has spent the most time on this stage because it's a particularly important one. Conducting the self-assessment using a number of checklists and diagnostics. I'm going to share some of those with you in just a moment. Step 2 is really about stakeholder engagement. So it's about bringing together the different regional actors who play some kind of role in innovation diffusion, whether it's with supporting companies, whether it's at policy stage, it could be any of the elements of innovation diffusion, but how these stakeholders work together, how they interact. The third step is around design. So this is where you're shifting towards the production and the design diffusion. And then the fourth step is the monitoring and the iterative element of it. And there is something that we've included here that I'm going to speak about a little bit later, which we've called reflexive monitoring. And I'll explain what we mean by that in just a moment. It's something we picked up through our working group and something we ourselves are learning a great deal about. So just to emphasize, the toolbox consists of checklists, self-assessment questions, analysis frameworks. Overall, it is not intended to be complex. It is intended to be adapted for use at the regional level, depending, for example, on the various steps that your region would like to focus on, or even adapting what some of those tools and guidelines that are proposed in the toolbox are so that they're more fit for purpose at the local level. So it should be highly flexible. Could we move to the next slide, please? Thank you, Santiago. So a bit more detail of step 1. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the most developed step of the toolbox so far, and it's very strongly related to a framework that was built by the S3COP Secretariat when the working group was convened in the first place. And this, what you see on the right-hand side here, are 4 strategic pillars which have really helped to underpin the work of the working group over the last 2 years. Now, these 4 strategic pillars really help us to understand 4 rather specific but very important innovation diffusion contexts within the regional setting. And these contexts, as you can see there, relate to, on the first pillar, adoption of new technologies, innovations, business practices, particularly for the SME community. So the first pillar is very much focused on the SME community. The second one looks at the role of universities and RTOs and their relationship in particular with industry. The third pillar looks at the role of innovation agencies. So in particular, looking at those public sector actors who support the supply side of innovation diffusion within a regional setting and who facilitate knowledge flows. And the fourth pillar connects to how companies actually interact with each other, whether they are large companies working with other large companies or large companies working with small companies or SMEs. Now, what we are proposing in the assessment phase is that in the first instance, there will be self-assessment done under each of these 4 pillars. So that consists of, for example, self-assessment questions, which we have produced a great deal of to provide examples. I'm not going to share those today because it's too much context, but this will help regions to undertake a reality check of their innovation diffusion situation in their regions, providing a baseline of the current level of performance and practice. Also, under step 1, we propose to have case study repositories, and these are examples from regional contexts, different regions of things that have worked well and less well with respect to innovation diffusion. So we will certainly be building on more of these through the working group. Could we move to the second step, please? This is the engage part of the innovation diffusion toolbox. And as you can imagine, engagement is really around stakeholders. And within this, we have what we've called interest influence grids. Now, what this is about is assessing the assessment of grouping stakeholders according to the roles that they can play to support innovation diffusion. So assessing them according to their interest in the topic and the influence that they exert. Then we have key innovation actor maps. This is creating a visual to identify where different stakeholders play a role with respect to innovation diffusion. And it can help to identify gaps, relationships between stakeholders, where networks exist, for example. Another important element is that the engage phase seeks to capture resource flows. Now, an example here is in tracking funding to assess where and how funding supports innovation diffusion flows within and across the region. And finally, undertaking an assessment of capacity constraints and opportunities. Here, this is very much focused on the supply side of innovation diffusion. So the actors who help to promote innovation diffusion within the region. So it's about taking a reality check with this group of actors and with the systems in place to understand skills and capacity, different structures, and potentially what might be some institutional bottlenecks, which could be, for example, relating to governance. So this whole section in the orange box underneath in engagement, it's about convening stakeholders, coordinating their interactions, ensuring an inclusive process, and then hopefully helping to lead towards a more collaborative effort for innovation diffusion. Could we go to the third step, please? This is the design phase. So this would be towards the development of what we've called a roadmap. So for this stage, we're working towards this development of something that would be a more tailored roadmap. And there are key tools that we will be promoting in the toolbox to support that. The first of these is milestone planning canvas. This is about sequencing, resource allocation, creating a transparent framework that helps to capture the various actions that would be taken forward in your roadmap so that they are very clearly identified and communicated. There will also be an action logic model for each of the strategic pillars that was mentioned in step 1. So using those 4 pillars to identify very clear inputs, activities, outputs, and outcomes with respect to innovation diffusion. Again, it's about creating that clarity of the kinds of actions and investments that are going to be needed. Feedback loop design. This is about having surveys, workshops, real-time data, dashboards, all of these kinds of elements that provide feedback into the system about how innovation diffusion is flowing and how it's performing across the region. We also indicated that we thought it would be useful to have an institutional ownership map. And this is really about understanding the different stakeholders within the region, what stakes they have with respect to innovation diffusion, and what different roles they play, either individually or collectively, how committed they are, what kinds of investments they are making. So understanding, again, where are the enablers and where are the bottlenecks with respect to ownership. And finally, something that we've called innovation diffusion enablers matrix. And an example of this, or part of it, is the grid that you can see on the left-hand side. This is about understanding what objectives there might be, enablers, tools, and examples. This is just to provide you with an illustration. So if we take, for example, improving how large and small companies collaborate with respect to innovation diffusion, an enabler to this could be incentivizing cross-size projects. A tool or a practice to support that could be innovation vouchers, also joint pilot calls. And an example of this that we found through our working group was the Clean Sky joint undertaking. A very big programme, obviously, but a very good example of how small and large firms work together. Can we quickly shift to step 4? I'm very conscious of time. I don't want to run over too much of the time that's available. So step 4 is about monitoring and iterating the process of innovation diffusion. And we really must emphasize here that we don't see this as being an add-on at the end of the process. It has to be integral and integrated into the innovation diffusion toolbox. And it's about ensuring that innovation diffusion and the system underpinning it remain dynamic within the region. So this is about multi-actor engagement, so bringing actors together to help to define the indicators and to, for example, collect data. This should not be done by one actor or one distinct group of actors. It should be a process that helps to bring actors together so that they have real commitment and ownership for the wider monitoring process. It should engage mixed methods data collection, obviously including qualitative and quantitative analysis, so that you can bring these different data sets and different insights together. There should be real-time feedback mechanisms. We are proposing there that this could be, for example, through interactive workshops or digital dashboards. And finally, it's about an iterative learning cycle. So that, for example, is about ensuring that you have defined intervals for when you're going to undertake your reviews of innovation diffusion or particular elements of it, so that you already have in the planning system when changes and upgrades might be able to be taken forward. And with this, I'd like to just reflect on what is there in the orange box around what was mentioned earlier of reflexive monitoring. We found that this was an extremely important example and an extremely important principle for the innovation diffusion toolbox. What do we mean by this? Well, it's about involving stakeholders directly in the assessment and learning process, combining continuous observation with collaborative reflection, and enabling all actors to collectively interpret outcomes, identify challenges, and co-design solutions. So it's backed to that wider ownership, commitment, and engagement, which of course is not only just about innovation diffusion, it's about those wider principles of smart specialisation related to, for example, the EDP, the entrepreneurial discovery process. As I say, this reflexive monitoring principle was very widely promoted in the working group, and we found it to be extremely useful for this outline design phase of the innovation diffusion toolbox. I apologise for going through that so rapidly. There are a lot of steps and stages there, a lot of toolboxes and guidelines, self-assessment checklists that are still to be really fully designed. But this is simply about the kind of operational context of the design process. I'm going to stop there, but obviously very happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Alison. Well, I think we need to remind that this is still work in progress, and this is the latest work in our working group. But you, Alison, presented a very clear explanation together with Susanna about what is the concept behind. And now with the moment for some questions. Yeah, you can raise your hand, or we are going to collect some questions we have in the chat. We have one question from Natasha Arvaniti that is saying if the ID toolbox is meant to be used during the EDP. Well, we can, Alison, Susanna, you can, Susanna, maybe you can answer. What do you think?
Yes, so definitely EDP is about engaging all the stakeholders in the ecosystem, and this toolbox actually needs the engagement of all the actors that are dealing with innovation. So it can be used in the EDP process, in the implementation process of the smart specialization strategy, And of course, it's part of the same concept. So yes, I would definitely agree. I don't know, Alison, Santiago, you want to mention something else in relation to this?
No, that it's a standalone process, but of course it should be integrated in the EDP, which is at the end the governance and the interaction of all the actors. That's what I can say.
I don't know if we have any other question at this point. We understand that the explanation of all the elements and steps was very brief, but it's just for you to have a general overview of what we are working on. We will then have a part with a Slido so that you can also intervene a little bit more, but we will appreciate your comments at this point. I think there is another one, Santiago, you can read it.
Yes. Another question from Raquel Vega. Thank you very much. Is there already any region that is using this toolbox as a pilot? Susana.
Well, as it was mentioned, we started with the development of this Innovation Diffusion Toolbox at the beginning of the year. We are basically advancing into the conceptualization of the rationale, the principle, and the stages that we will basically incorporate. And at this point, even though we are working very closely with all the regions involved in the working group, we haven't yet tested or piloted since it's not completely finalized. As I will mention at the end of the webinar today, we are having a physical meeting with the working group as a side event of the S3 conference mid-June. And during that meeting, we would like to concentrate our effort in defining the steps and the tools that we can provide, but also identifying some good examples that can be integrated as part of the resources available. And once the whole process is finalized and agree among the working group members, and then together with our colleagues at the region, I think we will be in the position to pilot, to test how this will be implemented in regions. So if your region will be willing to be one of the pilot regions and try to start with this exercise, please feel free to send us an email. And I think we will really appreciate, because we actually need, some real testing at the end of this conceptualization process.
Thank you, Susana, because I have one question. I jump in because this toolbox is like the final outcome of all our discussions and work with the participant regions in the last 3 years, in the 2 meetings we had every year, and the policy briefs we presented, and all these knowledge and challenges identified, and pressing issues when addressing the challenge of innovation diffusion is somehow reflected in this toolbox, right? But that is like the proposal of a toolbox to be developed. No, Susana?
Yeah, exactly. This is still a proposal. We had this mandate from the region to advance in these ideas as we were discussing the implementation challenges related to innovation diffusion, to have this tool that could actually help and guide regions in this process. I can see also a question from Natalie, how the toolbox will be distributed and made available. So we are still, having this proposal in a written document in a way, but our ambition is that if we manage to propose a robust tool, some digital resources can be created that can be available for all regions to be used for the self-assessment and with all the resources available. But we are not at this point yet, but it's very nice to see that the toolbox will have some demand, because the main purpose is to be used. So we will be sure that once we have the proposal robust and strong enough, and agree with the Commission to use the right channels to disseminate information and also to guide regions in the process of using it.
So thank you, Susana. People is getting into the mood, and questions are getting more complicated. But we have this question from Nineta Saniotu. Is in the sectorial discussion we presented, is the technology level of companies taken into account? How mature is the technology readiness of the company?
Could I maybe come in there? I think that would be an important part of the first step when you're undertaking the baseline, is understanding the technology sort of levels within the regional setting. Increasingly, obviously, that becomes more important with the EU's critical technologies, deep tech agenda. So undertaking some kind of baseline analysis of that is incredibly important, because it's not just about the tech levels of the company, but it's also about how technology can then be used and applied in the innovation diffusion process. So again, that has to be very much led by the status of the region, and of course its agenda, its vision, its investment criteria for going forward. So I think that's absolutely critical. And perhaps just even hearing this now, it's maybe something that we need to make sure is very strongly embedded in that assess phase, which perhaps we haven't quite got there yet. So I think that's actually a very good point to make. I don't know if you would agree, Santiago, Susana.
Yes, definitely. And just to complement, we could not share with you all the questions we have in this checklist, but definitely one of the questions is that if you have segmented kind of the level of maturity in innovation of your SMEs, so you can provide different services. And in order to identify which type of SMEs you have in terms of innovation maturity, maybe it's what you are meaning from the technology level. And this is very important, because you really, the regional administrations, they need to intend to provide different support services and grants adapted to the different needs of SMEs. And this is not happening actually. It's true, it's difficult. You need resources, not only financial, but also people. But yeah, we are addressing this issue. We have a good case study from Northern Netherlands that are currently doing this type of segmentations of companies by innovation maturity.
Yeah, just a couple of words on this, because I think, thank you, Ninete, very much, because this is one of the key elements. And I think, as Santiago mentioned, under stage 1, which all this, what we call the assessment, which is basically self-assessment, we have different matrix, different grids, with that includes some self-reflection questions and also some checklists. And there are some that are dealing with this sectorial approach and also with the technology level. And it's our aim in the upcoming working group meeting in June to finalize all the grids and be sure that all these approaches are taken into consideration. As Alison also mentioned, the idea is that the toolbox consider the different profiles of regions. So there will be a number of questions that for some regions are quite obvious and basic, so they can go quickly through it and then reflect on others. But all the approaches will be taken into consideration. But I think this is one of the of the key elements at the core of the assessment. So thank you very much for the question.
Thank you. And then we have another complicated question from Luis Goni, saying like if the toolbox is going to be kind of approved to support the process of fulfilling the enabling condition first criteria. While this toolbox has been suggested, proposed, requested or by DG Region, the European Commission, that a good idea to reflect of the work we've been done the last 3 years. This issue has not been discussed. We just can say only what we know is that in the beginning of this period, that is no guidance was being provided. So I'm not sure it's gonna be like certified as if you follow this. You can, but of course you can like check in this enabling condition. But of course, I'm sure it will be very highly welcome by the Commission when they evaluate the fulfillment if you are using this toolbox that they just suggested. I hope I could answer.
If I may, thank you, Luis. What a question. As you know, it's not, let's say, 100% clear that the enabling condition, as we understand it today, it will be in the future part of the S3 framework. But what we know is that S3 and all the elements of the what is now the enabling condition are the key elements of that, being innovation diffusion one of the elements that is more difficult to really structure, to self-assess, and also to assess from an external point of view. But regardless of how, in which form S3 will take in the next programming period, what we know is that this tool, the toolbox is going to be a guidance for regions to improve innovation diffusion processes in the regions. So if it's part of the enabling condition or not, it will not be as relevant as how the process can be improved. That in any case will be a way to support regions in this process.
Thank you. Thank you, Susana. I think we can go to the next session. Thank you very much, everyone. We will have at the end also, we would like to ask you, to all participants, to participate in a poll we prepared with some Slido questions regarding some feedback, additional feedback around what we presented today. But first, we're going to the next session, which is we have a great selection of experts with us today, that we kindly ask them to join us today and give some reflections about what a toolbox could mean in the efforts in a region to improve the innovation diffusion processes. We have two members of our working group who are, and I will welcome all of them, is José Antonio Pascual, is head of the innovation unit in Andalusia Trade, is the regional development and innovation agency in Andalusia. Also, we have Miriam Martin, is head of project management in TIC Biomed. It's a cluster of health and technology in Spain, and also those are members of our working group. And then we have two experts that wanted to join us today that are working in regional and territorial and innovation topics, is Cecilia Gagnan and also Anita Treckner. We are gonna try to have a interactive discussion, and I will just make some questions to the. I think all of them are connected, right? Yes. So, first question. They are not easy, I think, but I in any case, is what your initial thoughts about this rationale, what was presented, and of the toolbox, and the principles of, you know, the self assessment, and adaptive to the needs of each region. This first question maybe is for the group members: is how well do you feel is this toolbox is reflecting all the work we've done in the working groups, you know, where we identify the challenges, we share good practices, and everything. I don't know, Miriam or Jose, if you want to jump in.
Ladies first.
Thank you. I think that the biggest strength of the working group is that it shows a very wide heterogeneity of regions, but also the different profiles of stakeholders. So we have policymakers, we have cluster organizations, we have more like a company or business related stakeholders. So I think, I mean, we have really worked together in order to define this toolbox. And I think one of the principles that Alison explained, it's basically this regional diversity. So it's impossible to develop a toolbox only focusing on concrete regions with a concrete profile. And the way the different stakeholders work with each other. That is not, I think one of the important things of the toolbox is to take it as an assessment tool, not as something that could or include resources to be copy and paste. It needs to be adapted to the regional framework.
Mm-hmm. So thank you, Miriam. Jose, I want to take the opportunity of this introduction to tell, in your experience now with your work in Andalucía TRADE, and you are designing and implementing instruments that are implementing the policy, and you are working very much in innovation diffusion, technology transfer, bringing knowledge to market. With these 4 pillars we presented before, you know, the SMEs difficulties to articulate innovation, the links between universities, RTOs with industries, the role of regional development agencies, the collaboration between big and small enterprises. Where are in Andalucía you putting the effort, or you are seeing what is the biggest challenge in this challenge of improving the innovation diffusion?
Oh, well, could you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, let me say thank you for having me here, Alison, Susana, and Santiago, and thanks to the audience for being here. Well, in our case, I could say all of them. You know that Andalucía is a big region. And in this case, we have to face all of them. The adoption of the new technologies, the role of innovation agencies in this case, and maybe in my case, due to my daily work, maybe the knowledge spillovers. And you know, I think, in my personal opinion, that innovation diffusion is an often issue. And in my case, we always ask why companies, mostly small and medium ones, don't demand innovation as a key factor to increase their competitiveness. So in our case, we have to face all of them, all the challenges, but maybe knowledge spillovers and ID channels between large and small companies.
Mm-hmm.
And let me say one thing to add my colleague Miriam, because I think I was the last one to join the working group. And I would say, what did I find? I found a wide range of people, not only private and public ones, but all of them people on the ground, practitioners, daily practitioners, who has to face every day the challenge to improve, to boost the innovation diffusion challenge. And I think it is one of the most valuable thing about the toolbox. It has been a self-reflection process and with a very practical approach. And I think it has been useful for me as a practitioner, and I am sure it's going to be useful for the rest of the people who's going to use it.
Thank you, Jose. And we are now opening the screen to our external contributors today, and I would like to ask them about such a question. No, if this 4-step process is Anita, I see you in my camera. Is in your expert opinion, does this structure make sense? These 4 steps structure.
Thank you very much, Santiago, and thank you very much for the invitation. It definitely makes a lot of sense. We also see from our other working group that we are together with Susanna how the engagement makes things moving. And how it's very important to have all the stakeholders together to have this exchange and yes, to come up with a process, because I saw in the presentation, and it was mentioned, the word of silos that we still experience in so many ways. So this kind of support is very much needed, and I really like what I see, and I would really like to see that we have as many regions start using them, and to have as many of and to have the toolbox being piloted, because this will be then the way also to showcase how it's useful, as well as having other regions being involved in doing the same. So congratulations on a great job. I'm sure that the regions, as Jose said, that it will be very useful for practitioners as well as for all other stakeholders being involved, because I doubt that they will be coming with the toolbox themselves. So for sure, this will be in support to the regions, and yeah, in support of the processes for sure.
Thank you very much, Anita. And Cecilia, if you want to add something, but not only to say if makes sense, but if also regarding the other questions, if it could be improved or streamlined, or if it gives enough flexibility for the regions to adapt it. What do you have any contribution on this?
Yes, thank you, Santiago. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invitation. And as Anita said, congratulations. I think it's a very good outline of the future toolbox. During the presentation, I was taking some notes, so I will share with you my initial reaction in case it's helpful. I definitely agree with Anita. It's a great structure. I would not suppress or add anything. What I would maybe do, I don't know if you agree with me, is to incorporate the idea of the relational capital as a cross-cutting field. We know already it's a very common belief that innovation is a relational process, and Susanna and Alison in their intervention really highlighted the challenges encountered in innovation diffusion are related to governance, to coordination, to empowering the intermediaries. At the end, it reveals the need the fundamental need, I would say, to explore and to comprehend the complex system of innovation actors in each region. If this is it, if innovation is a relational process, and if a big part of the problem SMEs and ecosystem find in supporting or advancing in relation with innovation diffusion, if this is the situation, it could be maybe a good idea to think about the possibility of incorporating in assess, in engage, not only in engage, it's very well described in engage as you presented it, but also in the checklist in assess, what is your relational capital, what are your main actors, how is the flow of information functioning, but also in design. What is the impact in design of these maps of actors in the regions, and even in monitor and iterate, incorporate the idea of incorporating some new indicators that allow for this reflection on how the maps are evolving through the project or through the path of this ecosystem in its action. I think it could be an interesting idea, and this relational capital mapping can be made today very easily. You know, there are a lot of instruments that use the basis of the analysis and the social analysis network philosophy, and you have a lot of open sources tools that can provide the ecosystems with a possibility to make it digitally and to visualize in a map what is the current situation, what are the key actors and the key entities, what SMEs are linked and what aren't, and which one of them aren't connected, to identify gaps and to know the flows and interactions among agents. So this is a first idea. Then I also read your question regarding how could the region improve, how could the region use this toolbox. I think an ideal scenario would be if we manage to incorporate these toolbox in the very core of the EDP. Imagine entrepreneurial discovery processes linked to each smart specialization strategy using this toolbox. You would have the agency for these actors, and you as a region would have a participatory process which is rich and has a meaning. And I was also thinking, and this would be my last reflection, on two things. The first one, take into account for the case studies, which in my opinion are very relevant, that you identify this as part of the toolbox, that the existing I3 consortia, some of them can be a really good case studies to be incorporated because they are doing really nice things on how they are preparing themselves for the future follow-up of the project and how they will work in the innovation diffusion. And final idea, just a suggestion, maybe it could be useful to think about the possibility of incorporating the ROI, the return of investment. In my experience, SMEs struggle to incorporate innovation most of the time because they are not aware of the return of investment. If we could add this dimension to the toolbox, it could be very helpful, I think, to support innovation uptake.
Thank you very much for all the comments and all the contributions. I think are very good for the conversation today and also for the work we still have in the working group. Thank you very much. You really answered the questions brilliantly, I would say. Let's move to the last questions. So I would like to ask also, to Miriam and also to Jose Antonio about the steps in the toolbox do you think is the most beneficial for regions, and what is the most difficult to implement? Maybe Miriam, do you wanna start?
Yeah, that's a difficult question. I think the first thing is that the steps should be considered not as a one step after the other, but maybe you are on the third step and then you go back to assessment. So for me, what is very relevant is once you do the assessment, what is very important is to identify why do you want to do it, the objectives, and which are the needs. I mean, within the assessment, which are the priority, the needs within the region. Why do you want to start this process? Because those are going to be key elements in the definition of the strategy, in the definition on who do you want to get involved or to be involved in the process. The second step, that is engagement, but also how you are going to do that. And that is the third step. And something that Cecilia has mentioned as a ROI for the SMEs, and I think it's also very relevant, is you do something, you set the objectives at the very beginning, but then you also need to have in mind how you are going to make it sustainable, which are the adoption strategies. It's like, why do you do that? It is a process towards an end, let's say an aim. And if those adoption measures are not considered from the very beginning, sometimes it is very challenging to define them in the middle of the process. So which are the most important steps? I have to say that all of them were very relevant, and but the first step in the assessment, the definition of the objectives, the adoption strategies, and who is going to be involved, I think it is key for a successful implementation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe the first steps are key to ensure we'll come to a positive result or end. And Jose Antonio, as you will be one interested region to use this toolbox, definitely. Sorry. Yeah. No, I mean, what is for you the most interesting or and challenging step or part of the steps that you initially think? I mean, maybe in the assessment part or the mapping or monitoring.
Well, I must answer all of them. I mean, the most important thing is to have a holistic approach. I think it's not possible to improve the innovation diffusion without all the steps. Assess, engage, design, and monitor. It depends on the region. The most challenging will be one of them. From a personal point of view, engage is the most important one. Ecosystem is, I mean, the innovation diffusion needs an ecosystem approach, and you need to be able to incorporate on board all the agents. Without the most relevant agents, the policies are not going to be efficient, I think. So engage is extremely important. And the first super steps in the engage step could be to create a comprehensive understanding on innovation ecosystem, to have the same perspective to be able to create a common goal to achieve a common challenge. Let me put on the table my opinion about the return on investment. It's something that Cecilia says I 100% in agreement with her, but I think it's a little bit difficult for people who work in the public sector to transmit how important, how relevant for the SMEs the innovation is, because this is not about externality. This is for us, but for them it's about to make profitable their companies. It's our main challenge, I think.
Okay. I don't know if there's any reaction from the speakers on this. Otherwise, we can, yeah, according to your experience, do you see, we're talking about the holistic approach, do you see where do you see the biggest bottleneck in this ecosystem in every region for engagement? Like we're having this question like universities, companies, governance or intermediaries. Do you want to, I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. Let me you know, make the question that you posed to the panel a little bit even more complex, because it was also a question in the chat that we mentioned at the beginning when explaining the innovation diffusion toolbox, but maybe it was not clear enough that the primary, let's say, user or the one who will be leading the use of the toolbox will be the S3 policymakers. But of course, the engagement of the whole ecosystem is needed. So in this way, just to complement to your question, as highlighting what Jose Antonio mentioned, this comprehensive approach is needed. But do you have in your region the capacity to actually steer the process, to lead the process? And this is why we mean what will be the most effective way, because this is also the capacity that you need to mobilize all the ecosystem to be sure that they are integrated into the innovation diffusion process in the best possible way.
Yeah, you see the capacities in the regions. Maybe Anita, are you working with regions from different backgrounds?
Yes, thank you, Santiago. And I apologize in advance if you will hear the noise. Unfortunately, I have some works in my building. What for me would be very interesting to see is to have the case studies coming from more and less developed regions. Because this is what we also see when it comes to I3 implementation, that it makes a lot of difference. So for me, coming from Croatia, I know that they do lack capacities in terms of leading this type of processes, but then I'm also not sure if this is the matter of capacities or the matter of strategic views and priorities that they set. So they just put priorities somewhere else. Because this also showed when we started to engage Croatian authorities in I3 instrument, that this was extremely difficult. Because they couldn't understand it, and in a way we were educating them about the instrument and the process by engaging them and asking them for the support to different consortia. So I see differences in between the regions in that regard. So I think that having this type of a case study would very much also show how more developed regions are doing it different and why this is different in terms of the engagement and success they may also have in terms of yes, having all the right stakeholders together and working together. The other issue is this interinstitutional, I would say, fragmentation. So it is not only that they are not able to work together with other stakeholders, but they also have issues in communicating and collaborating in between themselves. So there are a lot of granularities, I would say, in between different stakeholders, and then putting them together for the ecosystem to be not so fragmented and not to work in silos is a challenge of itself. And mentioning the issue of SMEs also through the collaboration and working with all of them together, we saw that for them this is a particular challenge because first of all they don't have that much touch with the public authorities themselves, and then also to understand all these processes and how this works. It is really another bottleneck, I would say, in the entire process. So yeah, there are a lot of granularities, and that's why I like to what I have seen in the toolbox, because you were able to tackle most of the elements, and also it was very valuable what Cecilia has mentioned. So I really see this as something that will continue and grow, and definitely the piloting of it will make it to be finalized and shaped in this way. But it's a very important start, I would say, so that we really see less of silos of fragmentation in the future.
Yeah, definitely. That's important. And I think with the case studies, we really need to keep the balance. So all regions can mirror themselves or also seeing another regions as an aspiration. I don't know if someone else would like to add. We are just finalizing the panel. We are gonna go to the Slido questions immediately. I don't know if
maybe if I may, I cannot see where I can raise my hand. Santiago. Maybe for the last question on this slide about the most effective way for regions for approach using the toolbox. I think indeed, as already was discussed, of course, we know that it are our governments or government agencies that are really important to spread this. So, for example, in Flanders, we have the VLAIO, is the agency for entrepreneurship and innovation, and they reach out to companies, smaller companies, bigger companies. I also think the intermediary organizations that reach out to companies like chambers of commerce, etc. But I also have seen that in Europe we have this group for the more the small and medium enterprises, because their innovation is often less use. They are less into innovation than, for example, corporates or big companies with R&D. So there, I think it's very important. And there are also some organizations like in Europe, SME United. Are they also maybe a channel that could spread our toolbox question? Because there you have more than 30 European countries and a lot of organization members. So maybe we can also spread this through different channels. This is only an idea I like to share.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Barbara. Barbara is member of the working group from the University of Antwerp, pretty much involved in research and technology and knowledge transfer. Yes, thank you, Barbara. Miriam, I didn't see hands, but now I see your hand.
Yeah, thank you, Santiago. No, my thoughts were about the bottlenecks, and we were discussing about the ownership of say who is going to take the lead in the process of using the toolbox. But I think as important as the ownership, it is the responsibilities that are allocated in the whole process. So it's not only who owns that, but who defines who is doing what. And in order to be effective and have some impact, I think we also need to answer the questions like, what's in it for me? It's like why a stakeholder is going to be engaged in the process, and then he's going to take like a secondary ownership of what they are going to do. So it's very important to define who is doing what and how those different activities are interlinked. And so it's very important to have a look to use cases, not only best cases, so successful stories, but also what didn't work in some of the regions. And maybe it is impossible because of the regional diversity to copy and paste, but it's just, I think what is important here is really to understand why they did that and why it wasn't successful and why it was successful. And according to the resources I have in my region, what am I able to do? So for me, the toolbox, it is not copy and paste. It is like a source of inspiration, let's say, in order to define your regional activities. And then one thing that it was very important and I forgot to mention in my previous answer is to monitor, because monitoring something is the only tool that will allow you to pivot and redesign what you have done. You need to know whether what you have designed, it is working and why it is not working. So monitor, it is very important, and to set a very solid, let's say, system of monitoring and define the right KPIs, it is really like a stepping stone into the definition or the implementation of regional strategies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true that one size does not fit all. Mm-hmm. And now we having Cecilia writing in the chat. We're still in the panel, Cecilia. Would you like to answer the question?
I didn't want to take more time. We were closing the panel.
Please.
No, just an idea that precisely because I agree with what Miriam just said, maybe we could also think of our quadruple helix stakeholder universities and to involve them in adapting with this place-based approach this toolbox to the regional reality. It could be also a nice idea to involve students on really place-based research on how this toolbox could be applied to the regional needs, the precise innovation scenario of each region. Just an idea.
It is true that in the assess we have we need to be short in the questionnaire, but one part is focused on the role of universities. I think it's also a good idea to consider. Thanks, thank you. We are approaching to the end of the I don't know if someone else wants to comment on last comments from the panel or some other questions from the audience.
Maybe Santiago, I would just add that it would be also potentially relevant to approach a committee of the regions because they also have a lot of panels, events, etc., to which our policymakers usually respond and they attend, and maybe also to organize a sub-event or something in the scope of their events, because they're always very well attended, and maybe they could also help and support the diffusion of the toolbox, and also maybe provide some relevant input as well, just due to the capacity and the critical mass that they gather as well. And then again, as I was saying, coming from Croatia, I know that for our policymakers, whatever comes even from a higher level, in a way, it's something that they would follow together as examples from other countries, and as I was mentioning, case studies as well. So just to try to build a critical mass so that the toolbox gets as much as promotion as awareness in this way too.
Thank you. Yeah, we're talking about engagement and bottom up, but we really need political engagement. Otherwise, it's very difficult this to work. I think it's a good idea to involve the community of the regions, and in the future, in the next step after we present this concept in next months, and the actual development of the toolbox will start. I think in the process and methodology, this at least the presentation of the toolbox in the community of the regions would help a lot. Would be an asset. All right. We are having some questions in the Q&A. Q&A in Zoom. Yeah, you say that the S3 policymakers, maybe Susana, we need to clarify here, and also in the toolbox, you say that S3 policymakers would be the main users of the ID toolbox. What about other quadruple helix stakeholders, innovation facilitators, type of clusters, incubators, industry, society? How could they benefit from the toolbox? I think this needs a clarification, Susana. Regarding, S3 policymakers will be the promoters, but of course the rest will participate and benefit.
Exactly. No, I mean, we truly understand that because we are talking about innovation diffusion, this implies that all the stakeholders in the ecosystem are relevant, are important. But when designing the toolbox, we needed to think who from the ecosystem we actually take the lead in starting using the toolbox, starting trying to go through the different steps, and also taking into consideration all the resources that will be available through the toolbox. So it means that we initially design this first conceptualization, thinking about S3 policymakers at regional/national level, the ones leading the process in the first instance, but of course, because the engagement part is such an important step, this means that actually you need to get into conversations and also involve in going through the toolbox all the relevant stakeholders.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially because we intend to influence the policy design and the instruments and the support services to improve S3 implementation. So that's why we propose that the S3 policymakers should be the leaders, but of course other intermediaries could lead the implementation as well. This question was from Julia Firsova, by the way, I didn't.
And actually the result or the outcome of the whole exercise on trying to self-assess the innovation diffusion process in a region will be used by all the stakeholders in the system, because they all need to know in which part of the stakeholders map they are, what are the role that they are taking, how they can improve the role, how they can interact better with others, and how actually they can contribute in a more efficient way to the innovation diffusion in the region. And as we mentioned, there is all these roadmaps that are part of the design process, what we call step 3, which basically is about putting on the table actionable plans that can actually work in the regions. And for that, the role that the different stakeholders are playing, but also the mechanisms and how they will interact with each other is crucial. So it's not about being a top-down, but as it was mentioned also before, thanks to one of the questions, is part of the EDP conceptualization that all the stakeholders should be involved in the process. It cannot be in another way, because we are talking about innovation diffusion.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you, Susana. Well, we have some comments like Mitza Edge saying it would be interesting to see the use of the toolbox in relation to the criteria of the 1.1 enabling condition. Of course, is inspired in this request by the regulation, and it will be always keep it linked. And also Ignacio Gaffo is suggesting to also add other political parties, I would say like policymakers like the European Parliament and other members. Yeah, thank you for the suggestions that are indeed. When I was saying the Committee of the Regions is any high level policymakers that could be informed and also support the process. Thank you for the comments, Ignacio, as well. I need to pass and close the panel. Thank you very much for the participants to accept the challenge to participate in to give opinion on toolbox in construction. So, but still very meaningful contributions, very useful for us and also the rest of participants in the discussion. We are going. Please don't move yet. We want to collect a bit. Very fast in 3 Slido questions, your opinions or thoughts, views on this toolbox. I'm gonna share. Yeah, I think first I can share the. Yeah, or first I will. Yeah, we have here the QR, and also I will put here the in the chat the. Yeah, the link, and with the link you will need the code, but I will, so it's here. I will stop sharing this and I will start sharing this one. All right. So even if you want, if the link doesn't work, you can just type slido.com and introduce the code. So let's wait for a couple of minutes because the first question will take longer since people is trying to log in. It's a difficult question actually. but interesting to see.
It is difficult, but it's just for us to know a little bit more where to focus or which will be the step in which we need to provide additional resources to support regions and ecosystems. And then after you answer the questions, maybe in the chat, you can maybe explain a little bit or you can unmute if possible. So why do you think, for instance, engage will be one of the most difficult or most challenging, etc., so that we can also understand a little bit more what is behind. This will help us to calibrate the resources, the grids, and the cases that we can incorporate in each of the stages.
Yeah, and it's difficult also because of the amount of information you receive. I mean, not much information you receive about the details, but still interesting.
Yeah, we have time, so no worries. Take your time to answer it.
Is it the case that step 1 still has 0? There's something not right there.
So my impression is that
Okay.
engagement is one of the issues that could take a lot of effort, but also how to track and monitor all this is something very, very challenging. I think that there is a comment from Nineta as well. Yes, you are totally right. So this is about capacity, and this is about capacity building. So we would like to keep working in this capacity building and try to build some, let's say, itineraries, pathways in which we can actually prepare regions to use the toolbox, for instance, and make the most out of it, because it's not going to be designed as a very close tool, but as a reflective tool. And I think this is very important. And also all the discussions with the Committee of the Regions, I think this is a very good actually suggestions. We didn't actually think about this before, but I think this could be also important to understand.
Well, I think we only had 30% of the people connected that entered, but I think the message is clear, no? That with the information they have, the biggest share of people thinks that all steps are equally challenging.
Yeah. We still have more than 60 people connected at this point, but only half answering the Slido. So if someone else would like to answer, you are having problems in connecting with the tool, let us know in the chat. Otherwise, we can go to the next one. We have some more people.
I think this question is not regarding important, but challenging, like difficult. It's not difficult to answer a checklist. It's not difficult, you know, but it's very difficult. What is always difficult to engage with people, to do a good monitoring and take decisions based in evidences and systematically doing monitoring. That's the most challenging. Yeah. I think we can go to the next question.
Yes, but this is a very good indication of for us to work further. So let's go to the next one. What could improve the toolbox? The structure, the content, Here is basically like a word cloud, so you can include keywords.
A couple of words, 3 words maximum, no? Is only 1 word ideally.
Yeah, for us, it's very important to design something that is useful, that actually provide added value. We don't want to just to work on something that is another tool, that is something that is there, but something that actually has no benefit for the region. So we want to drive all this reflection in the different regions so that they can adapt their policy mix and they can actually have a more proactive engagement with the rest of the stakeholders in the ecosystem. That sometimes regions lack of this comprehensive approach, but also, as we are seeing, is very difficult to engage with the different actors. Something that I'm seeing now in the results, and that I think maybe also Alison, Santiago, or Midian, or any other of the working group members that are present now, when we discussed this, we thought almost immediately that the tool will be for self-assessment, so that you can also compare over time with yourself, how you move in certain directions, how you are improving certain areas. But we maybe wrongly consider that benchmarking with other regions could be a little bit misleading, but I'm seeing this, that this is popping up here because of the different characteristics of the different regions, and sometimes because we are, benchmarking ourselves with a region that is structurally, economically, socially different. So it was more about having, you as your own role model and comparing with yourself. But, if there is interest in having this type of benchmarking approach, this is something that can be considered. I don't know, Jose Antonio, Midian, Barbara, Alison, Santiago, what do you feel about this benchmarking idea?
I think it's a really interesting idea. One of the things that we would have to be a bit careful about, and this of course is still at the very early stage of design, is that if it's going to be a tool that's useful at the local level, it has to be tailored to local needs. So the ability to scientifically compare with other places, of course, would be very limited. But I think that's maybe not what's being suggested here when we say compare. It's maybe the stimulus and the discussion, and maybe almost like a kind of opportunity for exchange in maybe a peer review kind of setting to open up a dialogue and discussion about innovation diffusion in a slightly more structured way than we've been able to do in the past. So it's not necessarily that you have to be able to have indicators that are directly comparable from one region to another, but more that you can explain how you have done your own self-assessment, what kinds of reflections that have come from this, and how do others see the tool? What has it thrown up for them? What has it indicated? What has it shown them that perhaps was not so visible before? So the way that we use that word compare or benchmarking probably has quite a big spectrum, but I think it's really interesting, and I think it's something that we should take up with the working group.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I like the idea of mutual learning and this narrative, because we are not at this point offering a set of indicators in the most traditional understanding of indicators. Yeah. Okay, and I think, but more like tools actually to go through the process and improve the process. But something that it's popping up very highlighted is the pilot, the testing. And I think we definitely agree with that. We are very enthusiastic about this, the initial developments that we are doing with Innovation Toolbox, but of course, our aim will be to have, this practical use in some pilot regions. That's for sure. The idea of good and bad practices. This is also a very nice idea, and we discussed extensively about the use of good practices for inspiration and having this repository of case studies. I personally think that
Susana,
we learn even more from the bad practices, but it's difficult to, appear or be part of a repository with your name, your region, describing what didn't work. But I think this is an exercise that we need to do, definitely. Jose?
Susana, sorry. Yes. I just want to say that in my case, I think it's possible to learn more about bad practices than good ones. And I encourage everybody to share the bad practices, since we didn't want to share when something doesn't work, but I think it's extremely useful, and it's not so common because maybe it's less brilliant to share bad and good practices. But I think to make a bad practice toolbox or repository can be useful.
Yeah, definitely. What I see here as well is the word political commitment. And I think this is fundamental. This is, I will say, even a prerequisite to use the toolbox. Ideally, this should be led by the S3 policymakers, a profile like Jose Antonio. And this means that it's needed, this political commitment. We're also working with Anita and Cecilia in the policy lab of dealing with how to engage better managing authorities in I3 projects, and we are discussing similar issues about how important is the political commitment, not only on paper but also actively engage in this type of activities.
Sorry, Susana, I'm still sharing or not?
Yes.
Yes, you are sharing.
Oh.
We have someone writing.
Okay.
But as soon as as you tell me, I will go through the final question with the Slido.
Yes.
Shall I go to the third one?
Yes.
So this is about basically how useful you think this type of toolbox, or this toolbox particularly, will be in your region for your institution, regardless if you are here as a regional authority or an innovation agency, a cluster, or whatever. How you see this? Because of course the effort should be in the direction of being useful. Otherwise, it's just accumulating other report or the tool that does not address the right things.
Should we go to the last question?
Yes, people are voting.
Okay, so I'm lost. I'm not seeing my screen. Sorry.
I think you should go. Yeah.
Yeah. Now.
Next one.
Now, right?
Yes, we can see it. Here we see some people still voting. So this is basically like a reality check for us. Okay, again, we want to improve the way innovation diffusion process is happening in regions in Europe in the framework of the S3, as we are working as part of the S3 COP working group. But of course, innovation diffusion is not only related to S3, but is something broader. So we will keep working in this direction to be sure that we provide regions with a useful toolkit that can actually help them to improve all these processes. So maybe Santiago, we can just go back to our presentation with the very final message, which is actually our next steps. And I guess from all the participant list that I could see in today's webinar, we see that there are many familiar faces, familiar names, and I'm sure most of us will have the possibility to meet very soon in Brussels. We have, as you know, the S3 conference that will be taking place the 18 June, the whole day. And as a side event of the S3 conference, we will have our last working group meeting with all the regions, with all the experts that are part of our working group. And the aim of this final discussion group, working group that we are going to have, is basically to be able to put together all the elements that we have shared with you today and improve each of the different stages and see how far we can go with the resources that we would like to incorporate. Of course, as Santiago also mentioned, we are co-developing this toolbox together with colleagues at the European Commission. And after that, we will need to agree with them in which way this can be integrated. But we believe that by providing tools that are fostering internal reflections in regions, that are actually providing elements to have this comprehensive, this holistic approach that it was mentioned several times, this will improve innovation diffusion in the different European regions. So I have nothing else to add at this point. I don't know if maybe Santiago and Alison would like to have some closing words before we leave. I am looking forward to meeting you again in Brussels very, very soon. And please, we are available for all the questions that you might have on the toolbox afterwards, or any suggestions that you would like to share with us, or even proposing your region to pilot the toolbox. So thank you very much. I leave you with the chair and the rapporteur for the very final words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Susanna. I would just make a couple of very quick comments, just also to emphasize a huge thanks to everyone for joining today. It's actually been really informative and quite insightful. I just wanted to reflect on a couple of things that were said today that I think we do need to take a little bit more of account of, and perhaps also in communicating what we understand to be the purpose. We can't take this toolbox as being a proxy for if there is a continuation of the innovation diffusion enabling condition, that if you have a toolbox in place, that means that you must be covered. It's more about enabling that process of innovation diffusion. So we need to be careful about how we manage the communication on that. I also liked what Anita said, that the toolbox is a way to overcome silos. within the stakeholder community of the innovation ecosystem. And the stakeholder dimension, as was mentioned around connecting this to wider EDP, is a really important one. Cecilia also picked up on what she called relational capital, which I think is a very important element. And how do we ensure, or how will regions be able to check how their stakeholder maps evolve over time? And as we can see, the more use of the digital tools that we can have for this will also be extremely helpful at the local level. Maybe we have to unpick a little bit more about what we mean by return on investment. It's incredibly difficult, as we know, in terms of causality. So I think we have to manage expectations about what the toolbox can do with that, but it's certainly something that's worth looking at. The other point that was made was about inter-institutional complexities. And I think that's a really important one to pick up. Anita used the example of Croatia and how specifics really have to be clarified in terms of understanding, in terms of governance and capacity with different institutional actors, and how they're able to use not just the toolbox, but actually to roll out an innovation diffusion approach effectively across the region. Then there was a big area around diffusion of the toolbox and different actors, institutional actors, perhaps at the EU level, or indeed using different networks to help to support that whole process of communicating and promoting it, and then getting that wider engagement. And I really like the big points that were made at the end under Slido. So 3 big areas there: consider the piloting. How will the toolbox be able to be used to help regions to conduct that narrative and conversation with each other around comparing practices, even if it's not about comparing performance, it might be about comparing practices, and of course using concrete examples, be they good practice examples or ones that you can show haven't necessarily worked, picking up on different examples being very applicable to different geographies. So being a less developed region, being a more developed region, having a region that is in a mountainous area compared to an urban region, for example. So the toolbox has to be able to be fit for purpose for the different regions to find it credible and useful. So from that perspective, I found today incredibly useful. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time today. And I'll hand the last words to Santiago. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Alison. Yeah, it's been very informative and good for us to finalize this work in the working group with the rest of the regions. I think you summarized very well the main highlights. I just would leave with what Cecilia said, that in an ideal world, or the vision would be that the innovation diffusion is in the core of the EDP and the governance of smart specialization strategy in a region, and in each priority, it is these innovation diffusions systematically analyzed and improved. So this priority is really unlocking the full potential. That's a very good, yeah, for me, an inspiration to keep working with the toolbox. So thank you very much, and see you next time.
Thank you very much. See you soon in Brussels. Bye bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.